How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another guide for City Skylines. In this video, I'll be looking at some of the forms of public transportation available and comparing the pros and cons of each. But before we get to the video, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a like if this guide helped you, and subscribe and ring that notification bell to see my other videos. I'll be focusing on buses, trams, trains, the metro, and the monorail for this guide. Starting with the buses, you'll need a bus depot before you can start creating lines. You only really need one bus depot to spawn all the buses for all the different lines around your city. I recommend placing it away from your residential areas as it does produce noise pollution. You'll also want to avoid placing it on busy streets as the spawning buses can cause traffic to back up. If you have a pretty big city, I recommend placing more than one so that your buses don't have to drive so far to get to their lines. Once you have your bus lines placed, you can edit them under the Transport tab. Here you can adjust the number of vehicles and the model that you use for each line. There are quite a few models with different capacities, but I usually recommend using the double-decker bus with a capacity of 65. It's the bus model with the largest capacity while still remaining a single-length vehicle. As you can see here, 2 double-decker buses can fit in this bus stop without blocking any traffic. If you're going to be using the super bendy bus with a higher capacity of 100 passengers, be careful as they can block up 1 or even 2 lanes of traffic if there's a bus waiting in line at a bus stop. The same thing goes for the articulated buses with a capacity of 80 passengers. Now to talk about the pros for using buses. First off, it's inexpensive, as you only need one bus depot to spawn all the buses for multiple lines. And you don't need any special roads or tracks unlike the other forms of public transportation. The bus stops don't produce any noise, so they're ideal for putting in suburbs and residential areas without worrying about noise pollution. Finally, it's easy to adjust your bus routes as the bus stops don't require any special buildings and can be moved easily. Now to talk about the cons. Buses are affected by traffic, so if you have heavy traffic in certain areas, this will slow them down and make them less effective. They can even cause more traffic if you have too many buses on a single line or if you have multiple lines using the same roads, causing them to back up. If you're using the longer buses with higher capacities, they can block up intersections and even lanes when waiting in line at the bus stop. And finally, they can be slow if you don't have bus lanes, and even if you do, they don't always use them and can cause more traffic when changing from the middle lane to the outer lane. Next, we'll have a look at the trams. Just like for buses, you'll need a tram depot where all the trams will spawn from. But unlike the bus depot, you'll need one tram depot for every line that you have where the tracks don't intersect with another line. It also produces more noise than a bus depot, so you'll want to keep it away from your residential areas. You'll need to place some special roads with tram tracks before you can create any lines. There are quite a few options that also allow you to have bus lanes, bike lanes, and even a monorail track above. You have quite a few options for the models, with the largest having a capacity of 140 passengers. But like the buses, they vary in length quite a bit, so you'll have to weigh the pros and cons of each to best fit your city's needs. Now to look at the pros for using trams. First off, they have a dedicated tram lane, so they'll only use either the outermost lane or innermost lane, depending on which type of road you use. You can also use dedicated tram tracks to go over or under busy areas to avoid causing more traffic there. And finally, they have a larger passenger capacity than buses, so you can transport more people around your city. Now, moving on to the cons for using trams. Just like the buses, they can be slowed down by heavy traffic and can also block intersections. However, since they only use one dedicated lane, they cause less traffic. They're also a lot more expensive than buses, since you'll need to build specific roads in order to use them. And if you have multiple lines across your city that are not connected, you'll need to have a tram depot at each one, which can increase the cost quite a bit. Finally, since you're likely to have more tram depots around the city, this will cause more noise pollution, so you'll need to plan your residential areas around this. Next, we'll talk about the underground metro. You'll need to place metro stations around your city and connect them with tracks before you can make your lines. You can also use the parallel underground metro and the large underground metro stations for convenient transfers between your lines. Looking at the different train models that are available, I recommend using the highest capacity train with a passenger capacity of 500, as there doesn't seem to be much of a downside since the trains use their own tracks. Now to talk about the pros for using the underground metro. First off, they're not affected by traffic at all since they use their own tracks underground. They can also go through rivers or other bodies of water, so they're an ideal option for long distance travel across your cities. The metro station is quite small and the train tracks are underground, so it barely takes any space to use them. Finally, they have a much larger capacity at 500 passengers, so you can have passengers from bus and tram lines transfer here to travel further around the city. Now the cons for using the underground metro. They produce a lot of noise since each stop needs a metro station, so be careful not to place them near your residential areas. Each stop needs a station, so this can quickly add up in cost, unlike buses and trams which have free stops and can easily be moved. And since the train tracks are underground, this makes them really expensive, especially over long distances, so make sure you have enough money before you start using the metro in your city. Next up, we'll be looking at the train stations. Just like the metro, we'll need to create a station for each stop and then connect them with train tracks before we can place our lines. You can also have cargo trains using the same tracks, which can help transport goods and raw materials into and around your city. I also recommend using the train tracks that lead out of your city to help bring people and goods into and out of your city without having to use the highways. The options for models of trains that you can use is a little bit limited, but I recommend using the commuter train with the highest capacity of 400 or the high-speed train with a slightly lower capacity of 300 but travels a little bit faster. Now onto the pros for using trains. First off, they can connect to outside connections, bringing more people, goods, and raw materials into your city. Since it provides an alternative to the highway, it can reduce the traffic coming into and out of your city. And compared to the metro, the ground-level train tracks are much cheaper, so it's best for creating long lines to transport your citizens across your city. Now to look at the cons. The train stations produce the most noise out of any form of transportation, so there's a wider radius around them where you can't place residential. The train stations take up a lot of space, and so do the train tracks if you leave them above ground. This can make it quite difficult to plan your lines and place your stations if your city is already quite congested. The train tracks can also get quite congested if you don't have separate lines for your outside connections and your cargo trains. The final form of public transportation we'll look at is the monorail. Just like the metro and the trains, you'll need to place a station for every stop and connect them all with monorail tracks before we can create any lines. You can place a monorail station that goes next to the road, or you can use a station that goes over the road, which saves a little space. However, this only has 4 lanes, but is as wide as a 6-lane. There are a few options for roads with monorail tracks, with some that also let you have tram tracks below. Moving on to the different models, there are only a few, with the highest having a passenger capacity of 240. Now for the pros for using monorails. First off, they can be used over roads, so it saves on space, and you don't have to demolish or move any buildings to add them to an area. The tracks can also be placed at much sharper angles, so you can weave them throughout your city quite easily. And since they use their own tracks, they're not affected by traffic and doesn't get as congested as the trains. And finally, you can use them with other forms of transportation, since you can run tram lines or bus lines underneath. Now to talk about the cons. Just like the metro or the trains, they cause a lot of noise around the stations, so you have to be careful when placing them and make sure they're not near your residential. If your tracks follow the roads too strictly, you might have too many curves, which will slow down the speed of the trains. And finally, the tracks can't go underground, so this makes them a little less versatile than the trains. Hopefully this guide helped you understand the different forms of public transportation a little bit better and helps you decide how to implement them into your city. If this video helped you, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.